Hi, dear students. Welcome to our social science class. And today we'll be dealing with history. Okay, so we are having 3-4 subjects in our social science itself, isn't it? We are having politics, economics, geography, and history. And in this session, we'll be dealing with history chapters. Okay, history chapter. And in the history chapter itself, in your textbook itself, we are having a lot of chapters, and many of the chapters are dealing with world history. But today we will be dealing with a chapter that is dealing with Indian history. Okay, there is only one chapter that deals with Indian history, and that's our chapter. Okay, Nationalism in India. That's the name of our chapter. And speaking about this chapter is having a lot of years and events. Okay, but it is a lot easy, because if you study the years in a chronological order, then it will be very easy to handle the events, because every events are connected. See, for example, if I am saying we will be starting this chapter from 1914. That's the first year we are going to study in this chapter. Okay, so at first we will be dealing with an event that happened in 1914. Okay, then in 1915 another event happens, because it is having a connection with the event of 1914. Likewise, each years are having a connection, each events are having a connection. So if you are studying the years and events with proper connection, then it will be a very easy chapter for you. Okay, and we will be conducting the class likewise itself. Okay. So anyway, let's go to the chapter. That's nationalism in India, isn't it? So what do you mean by the term nationalism? It's a familiar term, isn't it? You all know what is nationalism. Another term that we use instead of nationalism is patriotism, isn't it? Patriotism. So what do you mean by the term nationalism? How can you define that? It's the love for one's own country, isn't it? If we love our country, then we can term that feeling as nationalism or patriotism. We all are patriotic, isn't it? We love our country. So anyway, in this chapter, the main theme is how nationalist feeling developed during the British period. Okay, we are dealing with history, isn't it? So here we are studying Indian history at the time of British period. At the time of British period. Okay. So at the time of Britishers, isn't it, what happened in India during British rule? Britishers came here as a part of their trade and all, isn't it? They came here for trade, especially they needed the spices from India. So they came here as traders, but later they had captured the political power. They started to administer us, isn't it? They made laws here which is favorable to them. They started to exploit every wealth of India, isn't it? They started to exploit us economically, socially, politically. They dominated and suppressed the Indians in each and every possible way that they could do, isn't it? So, in this chapter, we are going to start our freedom struggle movement. Okay. In this chapter, actually, we are dealing with Mahatma Gandhi and his freedom struggle movement. As you know, we are having a lot of leaders, isn't it? There is a lot of Indian leaders who had struggled for India's freedom. If we are saying some examples, we can say Subhash Chandra Bose, and Jawaharlal Nehru isn't there, isn't it? Lala Lajpat Rai, then Bhagat Singh is there, Rajguru is there, Bal Gangadhar Tilak is there, isn't it? So many leaders are there. Anyway, so we can even part our freedom struggle movement into two. That is a kind of non-violent movement and a kind of violent movement. Certain leaders are on the path of violence, certain leaders are on the path of non-violence. But both of their aim was freedom itself. Okay. Anyway, Gandhiji, isn't it? He is a peace lover and he followed a path of non-violence. So anyway, we are going to study about the freedom struggle movement. So students, our first year that we are going to deal is 1914. Okay. Maybe most of you will be knowing this year because it is having a lot of importance. Okay. And what happened in this year was First World War. First World War. Okay, First World War. So, actually, why you call it as First World War? We are calling it as World War, isn't it? Why is that? Because the reason is that most of the countries have directly participated in this war, and some other countries have indirectly participated in this war. That is, mostly majority of the countries had participated directly and indirectly in the World War. That is why we call it as World War itself. Okay. So, in that case, in 1914, India had also participated in this war, not directly but indirectly. You know why? Because Britishers are ruling us, isn't it? And Britishers were actively participating in this First World War. So, when they are the rulers, we Indians will also have to participate, isn't it? But that is not a direct participation, an indirect participation. Okay, in 1914, actually, Indians had troubled a lot due to this war and some other factors. Okay, so there will be a question asked, what is the condition of India in 1914, or what were the impact of First World War on India? That will be the question. Okay, so we are going to explain the points here. Okay, in 1914, the first trouble that happened to India was Britishers had raised the tax in India. Why? Because as we had already discussed, these the Britishers were fighting a war, isn't it? And when there is a war, what will happen? There will be a lot of economic loss, isn't it? There will be a lot of expense, especially military defense, etc. will be having a lot of expenses. So, for meeting such expenses, Britishers had raised the tax from India. So, the first point or the first trouble that India had was British raised the tax in India. Why is that? For meeting their war expenditure. Okay, so the first point, that is, mainly you have to concentrate here, raised the tax. Okay, then the second thing that happened in India was forced recruitment. What is forced recruitment? We had already mentioned something as an indirect participation in the war, isn't it? See, when Britishers fought the war, they needed more soldiers and military personnel. So, for the military personnel and the soldiers, they started to recruit Indians to their military force. So, many of the Indians were forcefully recruited. Actually, we Indians were not at all interested in participating in the war, but the Britishers started to forcefully recruit the Indians. Many of them from villages were being forcefully recruited to their military forces. So, the next problem that India faced was forced recruitment. Forced recruitment. Okay. Then, another thing that happened in India at this time was India had a lot of crop failures. That is, our agriculture at this period between 1940 and 1920, the crops started to fail. Okay, crop failures. Crop failure. Then also there is another thing. See, we can relate the point. If there is a crop failure, then there will be a food shortage, isn't it? If our agriculture is not productive, then there will be a food shortage. So, this automatically caused a food shortage in India. Food shortage. Then, food shortage means it will lead to something else, isn't it? Like poverty. Then there was a acute unemployment. Then not only these things, but also see, we can see every negative impact that is happening in India, isn't it? Apart from all this, there was another thing, and we are familiar with that at this period, that is epidemic. We are facing a pandemic, isn't it? So, India at this period had faced epidemic. Epidemic. Especially from influenza virus, and due to the epidemics, a lot of Indians started to die. So, we could assume the points here, isn't it? 1914, see, firstly, Britishers raised the tax from India. Why? For meeting their war expenditure. When the Britishers started to fight the war, what happened? They had to face a lot of economic losses. So, they started to raise the tax from India. Okay, then they started to forcefully recruit the Indian villagers to their military force. For what purpose? Because they have to fight the war, isn't it? It's a world war. They needed more and more soldiers. Then India faced a crop failure. Okay, then the food shortage happened in India. Poverty, unemployment, epidemics, everything shattered the Indian economy. Okay, so I think you understand the points. Okay, so here are the points that we had already written. See here, from this point you can see that all the defense expenditure. Okay, defense expenditure. Then for meeting the defense expenditure, then war loans, they had increased the taxes. Then another point, there was a price hike. Okay, because when the food shortage and all happened, the price of the food items and other things had increased between 1913 and 1918. Then leading to extreme hardship and other things. Then here is another point, forced recruitment in the rural area caused widespread anger, because the Indian villagers were being supplied to the military forces without their willingness. Okay, then another point, then in 1918, 19 and 1920s, we had mentioned that point here, isn't it? Crop failure happened in India. Then famines and epidemics happened in India. Okay, so these were the main points that we'll be dealing with the year 1914. So at the time of World War, India faced a lot of trouble, isn't it? Economically, socially, we were affected, and even we are not having enough food to eat. The food supplies are having a very good acute shortage there. Then there is no proper employment, isn't it? If the agriculture is failing, then the farmers and peasants will be having no job to do, isn't it? So a lot of problems had happened in 1914. Okay, so the next year we are dealing with is 1915. So I told you there is a connection between all these things, isn't it? So 1914, the World War started, and the World War entered in 1918. Okay, so 1914, 15, 16, 17, 18. It happened all these years. And in 1915, our hero, father of nation, he returned back to India. You all know he was a lawyer, isn't it? And he was working in South Africa, and he was fighting for the equality of black people there, isn't it? He started a struggle already. He had implemented his satyagrahas in South Africa. So again, now he returned back to India. So in the year 1915, Gandhiji returned back to India. So there comes our hero, isn't it? Now he will be carrying our freedom struggle movement, but it is a step-by-step process. Okay, so he came back. Then at that time he was not aware of the condition of India. He has just heard certain things, but he had not seen anything, isn't it? Because he was for a long years he was in South Africa. So now he had returned back, and then he conducted an all India visit. Why? To understand the condition of Indians. To understand the condition of Indians, he went all around India. He conducted an all India visit and he tried to understand the problems of Indians, the problems of peasants or the farmers or the poor people, and the kind of exploitation that Britishers are carrying out in India. Okay, so in 1916, he conducted an all India visit. He understood the problems, whatever is happening in India. Okay, then he implemented, he experimented his method of resistance in India. And his method of resistance is called as Satyagraha, isn't it? You will be familiar with this term, isn't it? Satyagraha. And it was a weapon or the form of resistance used by Gandhiji for fighting our freedom struggle movement. Okay. So what do you mean by the term Satyagraha? Satyagraha, isn't it? Satyate agrahikkuka means desire for truth. Satyagraha means desire for truth or love towards truth. That is the word meaning of Satyagraha. Okay. Then, in this method, he had insisted a lot of principles. If a person have to follow Satyagraha, then that person have to follow certain other ideologies, especially a Satyagrahi who is following a Satyagraha is called as Satyagrahi. Okay. Such a Satyagrahi have to always follow certain principles. One is truth. Okay. And the second is non-violence. He should be very peaceful. And dharma. These were the concept behind Satyagraha. Okay. Do not harm anyone. Even if we are opposing or resisting someone, then do not harm them. That's the basic theory of Satyagraha. It is called as a passive resistance. Okay. Because we are not at all inflicting any pain upon anyone. If we are following Satyagraha, if we are opposing someone, if we are resisting someone, then we are not at all hurting them. See, in our news channels, we can see every form of strike, hartals, etc., isn't it? And in those visuals, what we are seeing is they are hurting each other, isn't it? The police and the common people, they are throwing stones, they are beating them up, isn't it? Everything is happening. But here, if we are following the method of resistance as Satyagraha, then we should insist on certain principles. One is, we should not violate truth. We should be always following peace and non-violence and dharma, the concept of dharma. Okay. So, these are the main principles behind Satyagraha. Then, afterwards, Satyagraha, we can call that as a passive resistance. And the Satyagrahi is inflicting pain on himself. Gandhiji had once told that if you are a weak person, then you cannot follow Satyagraha. If a person have to follow Satyagraha, then he should be very strong and brave. Okay. So, which means we are not all harming anyone, but every harm is going to happen to us, isn't it? See, if we are resisting against the Britishers, what will happen? They will beat us. They may shoot us, isn't it? But a Satyagrahi should stay still on his own principle of truth. Okay, so that is what he called a Satyagrahi should be very brave and strong enough. So that is the concept of Satyagraha. Okay, so anyway, in this class, these are the topics. 1914, what happened in 1914? Afterwards, in 1915, Gandhiji returned back. 1916, he had conducted an all India visit. And now we had discussed about the principle of Satyagraha. Okay, so in the next class, see you all. Study well. Okay, thank you.